Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Brigitte Mars. Brigitte Mars is an herbalist and the author of the new book, Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health. You can find out more about Brigitte Mars and her wonderful work at her website, BrigitteMars.com. Welcome, Brigitte Mars.
Thank you so much. My pleasure and honor.
Wonderful. And Brigitte Mars, you've published a number of books, including Addiction Free Naturally. We share with our audience some of your other books.
Yes, Addiction Free Naturally, Natural First Aid, The Country Almanac of Home Remedies. Soon to be out will be Dandelion Medicine. I wrote a raw foods cookbook called Rawsome, and Beauty by Nature.
Okay, I'm sure that our audience will love to learn all about all your books. Now, Brigitte Mars, why did you write Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health?
Thank you so much for asking. Well, as a medical herbalist, I see a lot of people with physical complaints, and I find it very curious that in this country, when people have physical complaints, they go to one kind of doctor, and then when they suffer from things like depression, anxiety, phobias, OCD, they go to a completely different kind of doctor. And I don't see that enough connection is being made of how the physical body can be affecting the emotional body. I worked for a year with a psychiatrist, and we would make some dietary changes, make suggestions about herbs, essential oils, and found that these things really worked. And it amazes me that people will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and go to therapy every other week for years and years, and they never address the topic of what you might be eating or drinking that might be affecting your mental state.
So this is so important. So Brigitte Mars, 2 of my 10 books are about how to heal depression naturally without drugs. The most updated one is called Banish the Blues Now. And in Banish the Blues Now, I talk about how to heal depression naturally without drugs. And this is such an important subject because I think something like over 12% of US adults are on some form of psychiatric medication. And so people are out there looking for answers, but as a medical intuitive healer, when I'm working with somebody with depression and anxiety, like you talk about, I'm looking at everything that's affecting their well-being, including what I refer to as the 5 levels of healing: the physical body, the energetic, the emotional, the mental, and the spiritual. Now, Brigitte Mars, why do you think our culture struggles with so many mental and emotional problems?
Well, if I were to chalk up what are some of the top reasons why people might be diagnosed with a mental condition, certainly we have to put on the list trauma, which people might carry around with them for the rest of their lives, trauma that happened a long time ago. That's one factor. But another factor that I don't think is getting enough attention is a food allergy might be causing inflammation in the sinuses, the joints, the muscles, but it can also cause inflammation in the brain, and that can lead to all kinds of conditions. It's possible that some people maybe have damaged their gut microbiome by the overuse of antibiotics, and even if they're not taking antibiotics, not realizing that between 50 and 80% of all the antibiotics produced in this country go into animal feed. So you might think, oh, I don't take antibiotics, I use echinacea. But if you're eating commercial meat, milk, eggs, that could be affecting you. Some people might have a need for more supplements. Maybe they have a greater need for an amino acid or a B vitamin or magnesium. And yeast overgrowth, candida, can cause people to feel, I like to say, foggy, soggy, and groggy. It's also possible that people are unhappy with their working situation, with their relationships, and they don't really know how to deal with that. Uh, there's many heavy metal toxicity might be another factor, not realizing that the aluminum in their non-dairy coffee creamer or the aluminum foil that they're baking their fish or potatoes in might be affecting them. And, just one other thought, Catherine, and this is a theory of mine, but we certainly know that hunters of days gone by would kill an animal with much gratitude and then eat a part of the animal, maybe the heart that was going to give them courage, or the liver that would help them to have more strength. And if people are eating factory farmed animals, they might be taking on the anxiety and the depression that these animals have from being in really terrible conditions. And we know that animal products can affect us because any health food store is going to have things like adrenal extract and pituitary gland extract, which we know might nourish us in a certain way, but it's all about, how the animals are raised if you choose to use animal products. But people might even be exposed to synthetic fragrances that are causing them to, feel tired. I went into a bank the other day and I felt so sorry for the people that are breathing this chemical air freshener. I just have to go in there for 10 minutes. They've got to be in there all day. It's poison.
So Brigitte Mars, you did a great job listing out a number of the reasons that people may be mentally, emotionally unwell. I would add the obvious one, which is stress, right? So we live in a much more stressful culture than we did even 50 years ago. And a lot of depression is literally pressure, right? Just the pressure of modern life. And I love that you're talking about what we eat, because one of the things that we know that many people don't realize is that over 90% of your serotonin is produced in your GI tract. And when you go to a psychiatrist and they prescribe Prozac for you, a traditional psychiatrist is not going to talk to you about your diet. Now, Brigitte Mars, what are some foods that, in your professional opinion, improve our mental health?
So, in my book, Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, I use a formula that I've learned from studying Asian medicine, the 5-element theory. And I find that it works really well with diagnostic things. So let's just say, for example, depression, and the other side of that coin might be anger. I don't think enough doctors are saying, let's look at the health of your liver. So in that case, the liver likes a little bit of sour. So starting your day with some lemon and water might be a good thing. The liver also likes it when we eat greens. And so greens are high in chlorophyll. It helps our body use oxygen better. So, I mean, that's a simple thing people can do. I also think that, the American diet tends to be rather beige, white bread and white flour and bagels and toast and, muffins and pancakes and all of that. So I'm a big advocate of eating all the colors of the rainbow, because every color indicates a different phytonutrient. So I try to encourage people, like, sweet potatoes, for example. But let's look at another condition. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I think it's really important to look at the sugar consumption people are eating. And 200 years ago, the average American maybe ate about 4 pounds of sugar a year. And now that number is something like 155 pounds a year. And we have to think that the sugar's really been turned into a drug. It's not, molasses or honey or a dark maple syrup, which is full of antioxidants. It is a crystalline white powder, much like cocaine or something, that's been turned into a drug, and that makes it very addictive. And so, again, I think that in the future, I hope that doctors who are really trying to help their clients will say, you've got to, unplug from the sugar drug. And, we can get the sweet flavor, which is our birthright. After all, mother's milk is sweet and baby's first food is sweet. But we could get that from beans, from whole grains. We can get that from sweet potatoes, from fresh fruit and vegetables. Phobias, where people have a lot of fear. In Asian medicine, we would look at the health of the kidneys and the adrenals. And so another drug that we have pervading our culture is using refined salt. So a simple thing, rather than eating salt that's been bleached white and has had all the minerals removed from it, maybe we could include some sea vegetables in our diet, like hijiki or nori or kelp, things that people who live on the coast of some parts of the world are a lot more familiar with. So in general, I think it's very important to look at food allergies could be making you just not think right, that you have no energy, you're zapped. And of course, we can look at, gluten and dairy. It could be soy, it could be corn, it could be shellfish, it could be sugar, could be yeast. So
MSG is a known neurotoxin, right?
yep, and as well as all the chemical sweeteners, that could be causing irregular brain waves. So these are such important things. And in general, I love this philosophy in herbal medicine called the doctrine of signatures. So a lot of the plants that are good for the brain often look a little like the brain. Our brains love sulfur. So think cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts. Think foods that are high in anthocyanins that have a lot of natural coloration, like blueberries and plums and elderberries and blackberries. I'm also a big believer in eating more black colored foods rather than taking the beige route. Black foods like black beans. One of my favorites is chia seeds, which are really high in omega-3 fatty acids. And that makes a really simple breakfast. Instead of, eating, whatever people eat for breakfast, cereal, coffee, white toast, for example, try soaking some chia seeds overnight and then adding blueberries and walnuts to that and sweeten it with a little dark maple syrup. Would be a delicious breakfast and makes you feel like a superhuman.
I love that. And from my own experience in 30 years of natural healing, I've had clients who were literally going to the emergency room once a week with panic attacks.
Mm.
And when I put them on an eating plan that stabilized their blood sugar, they could literally stop the anxiety, stop the panic attacks, and stop having to go to the emergency room with anxiety. So now you are an herbalist. What are some herbs that can help enhance our intelligence and prevent memory loss?
Okay, I just want to add one other thing to the anxiety piece, though, because it's so common. A really simple thing to do is to smell some lavender essential oil. Just hold it up to your nostrils because you're so right on, Catherine. Very often panic happens when people have low blood sugar. So if they skipped, breakfast and just had coffee and something sweet, they're going to find themselves feeling panic later. So have a bottle of lavender oil wherever you are, because we know oxygen helps to calm the brain. So for intelligence and enhancing our memory, as we get older, the hard drive gets a little full. So I'm very, very a big believer in have a day planner and write everything down and bring it with you wherever you go, because you never know, you might get invited to a party or a potluck or a free yoga class or something wonderful. But our brains, I've already mentioned chia seeds, which are a black food high in omega-3s. I love the wild edible purslane, which is also high in omega-3s. It was Gandhi's favorite food. I also love blueberries and all those anthocyanin rich things that improve microcirculation, like blueberries and plums, purple cabbage, anything greens, kale and bok choy and zucchini. All the greens are going to help our brains and our bodies better utilize oxygen. And I'm also big on doing crafts with our hands. It seems that if we go back a few generations, the elder people or even the young people were doing things with their hands. They were whittling with wood, they were sewing, they were knitting, crocheting. And nowadays we have a culture that's just, pressing the remote, and we have a big problem with dementia. So I'm going to say knit one, purl two. It's great for stress. You can be making something for the future grandchildren or something. I really like that. And I'm also a big believer in when you read with a yellow highlighter. That's going to help imprint a little bit more what you're reading. And the essential oil that I love for memory is rosemary essential oil. And I taught my kids and grandkids when they were growing up, when you're studying for a test, take some deep inhalations of rosemary oil. And then when you have to go present that book report or test or warrior exam or whatever it is, put some on your hair, on your sleeve, on your mustache if you have one, and it's going to help you access that memory again.
All right, and we're talking about herbs that enhance intelligence and prevent memory loss. So what about things like ginkgo biloba?
So ginkgo biloba is one of my favorites. It's one of the best researched herbs. There's also gotu kola, one of the favorite foods of wild elephants. And we know what they say about the wild elephants, that they never forget. There's also an herb that's used in Ayurvedic medicine called bacopa. Both gotu kola and bacopa are considered, very, very important herbs for mental alertness. And, there's even sayings about like a few gotu kola leaves a day will keep old age away. So, but I would also put rosemary on my list. So there's many herbs, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can go to your natural food store and you'll probably find something that has maybe eleuthero in it or ginseng. Maybe you'll find ashwagandha in there, which is great when you need to be really creative. Maybe there's holy basil in there, which is also good for stress. So I love using herbs like that, especially when I need to be brainstorming or, I mean, herbs really help us write books. I mean, I really plan it like, oh, today's a writing day. So I'm going to look for some formula that has a lot of those herbs. I might be taking droppers full of something with rosemary and ginseng and ginkgo and gotu kola in it during the day. And of course, use it or you lose it. If we are just watching TV and reading brainless books, we need to keep polishing our skills. It's not like you finish high school and you're done. We want to keep learning our whole life.
So again, we're talking about herbs that enhance our intelligence. What about from the mushroom family?
Well, one of my favorites is lion's mane mushroom. And lion's mane is really good for neuro regeneration. So people who've had accidents or head injuries or any type of trauma. So I recommend that a lot. I have a client with Parkinson's disease right now who's using lion's mane, people who are recovering from strokes. But you don't have to wait till you're sick or have some kind of impediment. Lion's mane is a delicious mushroom. It even looks a little bit like, the nerve fibers, and you can even buy a little log and grow it yourself. It makes a great holiday gift for your loved ones. And then maybe you get to eat the mushrooms. So I'd say lion's mane, reishi mushroom, which is a little too hard to eat, but it is considered the mushroom of immortality. Shiitake mushrooms, which I like a lot for helping immune health. But I'd say when I think of mental health, lion's mane is going to be numero uno.
And with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. We're listening to Brigitte Mars, and we're talking about natural remedies for mental and emotional health. Brigitte Mars, you and I have probably already discussed about 20 different herbs. And someone listening to this might think, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the health food store and take any of this or all of this. How important is it to avoid combining herbs with psychiatric medication?
Great question, Catherine. So I when I meet with clients, I always have them bring all of the drugs, herbs, and vitamins that they're using. And I don't think enough doctors know what maybe the acupuncturist or the chiropractor recommended. So a really big one that is a very common concern is if people are on a selective serotonin reuptake inhibiting drugs, which
Such as Prozac,
and
yes.
Lexapro, that if they use St. John's wort, which is a wonderful herb for depression and helping to heal the nervous system, it could be too much. It could even move someone into a bipolar episode. So that's a really important thing. And I do think that, many times, even if you do bring your herbs to the physician's office, they might not know what it is. Like, what is this for? And out of safety, they just say, don't do any of it. So I do think it's important to know about what herbs you're taking, because it's really easy to go to one health practitioner after another. And then, to have a discussion with your physician if you're thinking of going off a drug. You can't just stop it cold turkey, especially if you've been on it a long time. So if you can find a doctor who's willing to work with you, maybe they can help you titrate off where you're using something less and less, and then at a different time of day or even an alternate day, you can add the herbs. But I do think with St. John's wort in particular, we want to, get some advice, talk to a medical intuitive, an herbalist, a holistic health practitioner, or a doctor that is competent and has done their research about herbs, because so many people are using them now.
Yes. And Brigitte Mars, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, I always in have a discussion about everything that you're taking. And I joke, I'm not a doctor, I don't play one on TV, so I don't make comments about medications. However, it's so critical that we avoid combining psychiatric drugs with herbs. And I'm going to go over everything someone's taking to make sure that they're covering the right bases or not taking too much. I see a lot of people who are literally making themselves sick with all the combination of everything they're doing. So if you're trying herbs and you're also on psychiatric medication, you want to be super careful, and you want to work with a professional who can make sure that you're not overdosing or making yourself worse. Now, Brigitte Mars, as an herbalist, what herbs do you recommend for people to help us sleep better?
So, I never use herbs as the first thing. I'm going to recommend some lifestyle things. So when it comes to sleep, I might say things like, maybe consider stop eating and drinking 3 hours before bed, because people will eat a pint of ice cream out of the freezer, which is, full of sugar and dairy, and it might make you snore more. And, drinking late at night might make you have to get up to go to the bathroom more. I also find that people might have more peace of mind if they get ready for the next day the night before. That way you don't lay there and think about, oh, I don't have any socks that match, and is it going to snow tomorrow? So lay your clothes out. You'll probably have a lot less arguments with the kids if they lay their clothes out too. You are not going out dressed like that. um, and then a warm bath before bed can be very relaxing. So whatever kind of ritual we can create. We also know that electromagnetic things might affect us. So if you're sleeping with your cell phone by your pillow, or you have a big computer system right on the other side of your bed, some people can be very sensitive. I mean, our bodies are made out of 70% water. And I've even found people might, move some of the electronics out of their room. I also love sleeping with an iPad. It gives a whole nother meaning to the
I
word
mean,
iPad.
eye mask, not iPad, but eye
Oh,
mask. Yes,
eye mask. Yeah, that
yes,
helps
yes.
a lot because light is going to trigger wakefulness. So when it comes to herbs, I really do like, valerian root, but it doesn't work for everybody. I like skullcap. I like passion flower. And I think that a lot of the herbal products out there, their dosage recommendations are very conservative. So I often tell people if 2 capsules doesn't work, maybe try 4, maybe try 5. But again, we don't want to just band-aid ourselves, just take an herb and you'll be able to sleep. We want to look at why aren't you sleeping? And again, if you've written things down, in your day planner what you need to do the next day, I think you're going to have a lot more serenity rather than like, what am I doing tomorrow? What do I need to be ready for? So if you have your books, papers, money laid out, I will also say that CBD, the non-psychoactive compound from cannabis, can work very well. But again, I think it's really good not to take the same thing all the time. And rather than just band-aid it with an herb, get to what some of the sources of what's keeping you awake. And again, you might find a simple thing like stop eating earlier. You're giving yourself fuel.
Right. Or eating sugar before you go to bed, and that'll keep you awake, or eating something that's upsetting your tummy. Oh,
Hmm.
I love your suggestions. Another remedy that I constantly recommend for people for sleeping is not an herb, but magnesium, right? And
Yes.
you can, especially if you have trauma, you can rub topical magnesium on your skin and it's very easily absorbed. If you take too much magnesium internally, it can give you diarrhea, but you can definitely take topical magnesium and rub it on your skin, and you're not going to overdose, but that's going to help relax your nervous system. Now, one herb that many people have heard of is St. John's wort. How does St. John's wort compare with Prozac for depression?
It's interesting, Catherine, because a number of years ago, St. John's wort was considered illegal. And the reason for that was, well, the plant can spread and take over. If sheep eat a lot of St. John's wort and then they get their, wool sheared off, they're more likely to get sunburned. But St. John's wort, Hypericum perforatum, means perforated. St. John's wort enhances light sensitivity. And that might be one of the reasons why it works. We also know that it can have the side effect of making one be more likely to get sunburned. So it can cause, photosensitivity. So if you are taking St. John's wort, you don't want to go out on a sailboat or skiing or something unless you have proper protection from the sun. But there's also the theory that maybe St. John's wort, and they keep debating what is the active ingredient, it might actually help our serotonin to survive longer. And I really like this herb. It's also good for the liver. It has antiviral properties. But if you hold the leaf up, it has tiny little holes in it, which is its indication that it allows the light to shine through. And sometimes people, if they're on medication, maybe they need to be on it for a while because that's what's going to save their life. But if they could take that time to learn about herbs, to learn about healthier eating, to find a therapist they can work with, maybe to learn about feng shui and redecorate their home and make it more beautiful, then when they decide to go off of it, perhaps with the help of their competent healthcare practitioner, they're going to have a lot more tools in their belt rather than, you just got to go off of it and wing it. They're going to have all kinds of skills that they've added that could help them.
So, Brigitte Mars, author of Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, what does this scientific research show about the efficacy of St. John's wort versus psychiatric medication for depression?
Well, there's a wonderful publication that I would point people to called Herbalgram Magazine, which is sort of like the National Geographic of herbal magazines. And there have been, many studies, but, as we know, studies can be done however you want to make the study look, like the study that preservatives and sugar has no effect on ADHD behavior. And then, the study was funded by a leading soda company. So again, as a medical herbalist and following the tradition of my ancestors, I really like the idea of like, okay, you can do your studies and that's great, but I really love tapping into what millions of people have used for thousands of years. But if you want some studies, you can always look at PubMed, which is a great resource used by herbalists. PubMed, Herbalgram has done many articles on St. John's wort, and they're going to report studies that are done all around the world, including Europe and Asia, which, I've been a subscriber to Herbalgram for many decades.
And with that, let's take a moment to listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author, and we're listening to Brigitte Mars talk about natural remedies for mental and emotional health. So Brigitte Mars, earlier you were talking about using rosemary essential oil. When people are wanting to improve their mental emotional health, what essential oils do you generally recommend?
Great question. So I love lavender for evoking a feeling of calm and stress relief, for relieving an anxiety attack, a few drops in the bath. It is not an aphrodisiac, so you may not want to use it, in the bath if you have love and passion on the agenda. But for calming the nervous system, it's even calming for, children. And again, we want to use pure essential oil, not synthetic fragrances, not diluted fragrances. So, find a company that you can trust. I do love rosemary a lot. Rosemary, not only as an herb, but as an essential oil, is considered a cephalic. It's good for all kinds of ailments of the head, memory, freshening your breath, headache. Um, I could even say, um, oh, Shakespeare said it so well. There's rosemary for remembrance. Pray thee, love, remember. He actually has Ophelia say that in Hamlet. So I really love rosemary, and I sleep with a little rosemary sachet in my pillowcase because it's said to keep you young longer and also stimulate epic dreams that you can remember. So I love that one. But I would also say peppermint is good if people are lacking energy. Of course, we want to look at why are you lacking energy, but peppermint kind of perks you up and makes you feel invigorated. Um, I think there's a lot we could do with peppermint and lavender oil. I think they're really good items to have in your first aid kit. But one of the benefits of the essential oils is it's getting you to breathe more deeply and fully. And even though our brains only weigh about 2% of our total body weight, our brains require about 80% of all our oxygen intake. So, make friends with a couple essential oils. And I'd say, if I were to own three, it would probably be lavender, peppermint. I probably would have tea tree oil in there just because it's so antimicrobial and could put it on cuts. But we don't want to, it's not so much for mental alertness. So I'm going to say lavender and rosemary and maybe peppermint would be three of my favorite ones for mental and emotional health.
I would also add rose essential oil, and rose is the highest vibration of essential oils. So anything that lifts your vibration, and also frankincense, which we know crosses the blood-brain barrier. And we're talking here about essential oils. So how would you recommend people use essential oils when they're wanting to improve their mood?
So a simple thing is just to buy a bottle of essential oil. And when you feel like you need to be perked up, calm down, just open the bottle and then take 5 deep inhalations on each side. That's one way. You can also soak in the bathtub with a few drops of essential oil. And I do love rose and frankincense. I'm glad you mentioned that. They're just pretty expensive. So make sure you're buying, pure essential oil and not something that's a synthetic, but those are both amazing oils. And Rose is said to open your heart center and make you feel more loving and compassionate. Another thing you can do is buy a little diffuser, a little machine, and these are make great holiday gifts. You can get one that puts humidity in the air, changes color, and you put in essential oil so you get fragrance. You get three toys in one: color, humidity, and aroma. So just diffusing it in the room. And of course, smell is one of our senses that is so profound. I mean, you walk into a place and does it smell right? I've walked out of many restaurants, like smells like rancid oil, or you're going to get a treatment, a massage or something, and there might be sick people, waiting for their turn. Like diffuse essential oils, they can even help prevent the spread of pathogens. So get yourself a little, machine, soak in the bathtub. You can also use essential oils in massage, where you would dilute them in a carrier oil like coconut oil or grapeseed oil or something. But there's so many wonderful books on essential oils, but the simplest thing, just smell it. Be very careful. I don't suggest people ingesting essential oils unless really know what you're doing and have a brand that is conducive for that, but that could really be detrimental. So we're talking about just smelling it or external use.
So I want to follow up on a question that I asked you earlier in this program, which is, how does St. John's wort compare to Prozac? And there was a study done in 2005 at the National Institute of Health here in the US. And the conclusion was that St. John's wort was actually significantly more effective than fluoxetine, which is basically Prozac, and showed a trend towards superiority over placebo. And this was a randomized double-blind trial. So with St. John's wort, Prozac, and placebo. So it's actually more effective for you than Prozac, right? So we want to be careful again with our herbs. Now, your book talks about mental emotional health. What herbs do you recommend for ADD, attention deficit disorder?
Okay, well, I teach herbal medicine at Naropa University, and there's a lot of college age kids that are still being medicated for ADD. And again, before I recommend an herb, I'm going to look at possible food sensitivities that might be causing brain inflammation. It's also interesting that a lot of the people with ADD were also the ones that had a lot of antibiotics for the ear infections and the strep throat, which harmed their gut microbiome. They maybe develop food sensitivities, so they might be sensitive to things that most people can eat, like dairy or gluten or soy or corn, for example. So I always want to look at that. I might recommend a fish oil supplement. So that's not really in the herbal realm. And because the drugs that are often recommended for ADD, Adderall and Ritalin, are very speedy, there's a couple different approaches one can take. One is to use an herb that actually does have a small amount of caffeine in it, like yerba mate or even green tea, which doesn't make people so speedy. Green tea, in Asian medicine, they say green tea gives the spirit a place to rest. So you could try that as a method of focus. But I also think that it might be worthy of trying some calming herbs. In Europe, valerian is often used, passion flower, skullcap, hops. Those are some of the other herbs. So you might have to try a few different things. And this is something a competent healthcare professional can help you with. But right now, we're seeing in our school systems, we expect kids to sit for long hours, and a lot of the programs that might be so conducive to them blossoming as humans are getting, cut. We only have art once a month now, or, drama, or, not every kid is going to be a sports fiend or a, computer wizard. Some of them are the thespians and the artists and the musicians, and we have to honor all of the different ways that children need to be nourished. So sometimes I just want to say this too, because it's very possible that in a family, if there are food sensitivities. And for example, one person has to follow a gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free example. Boy, it really helps so much if the whole family goes on the protocol, because it's so unfair. Like, oh, you get the pink cupcake and you get the beige one with no frosting. And there are ways you can make pink frosting, use a little beet powder and coconut oil and honey, but it makes it, kids want to feel accepted, and they want to feel like they're the same as the other kids. So whatever you can do, if the whole family goes on the bandwagon, that's going to help so much.
So we're talking about herbs for ADD, and one that you didn't mention that I recommend a lot, believe it or not, is actually chocolate, right? So when I have little kids and they're on medications for ADD, and maybe they want to, add more drugs to the regime, I'm like, well, try giving the kids some chocolate so that during the day when their blood sugar drops, they can have some chocolate, which is got a little bit of caffeine in it. It's got magnesium in it that's calming, and a little bit of sugar that is going to help, balance them and improve their focus. Here in the US, there's a brand of chocolate called Awake chocolate. And of course, I like just dark chocolate with sea salt, which is going to be high in minerals. But the Awake chocolate has some caffeine in it. And I find that super helpful for ADD kids to have just a few pieces of that throughout the day. So, Brigitte Mars, any final thoughts for our audience? You're an herbalist. How can people learn more about herbs for their mental and emotional health?
Well, I think it's always good to look at, as we started out saying, when did this condition begin? How can this be a teacher? Very often we can learn and grow from the adversity and difficulties in our life. And, I always look around you, not only your relationships with people, but your feng shui. If you're going home to a dirty, dingy, bug infested home, that's depressing. Or you can't find anything, that's going to make you more anxious. So, I love feng shui. So clearing clutter, spending time in nature, gardening, avoiding chemical fragrances. Those are places I like to start. And of course, my book, Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health, it has specific dietary suggestions, specific herbs. It also tells you a little bit about the herbs, like not to be used during pregnancy, or careful if you're on SSRI drugs, or not to be used for nursing mothers, for example. So I think before we just embark on like, let's take all the herbs, because I heard about it on a podcast, like read a little bit more about it. I think it's good to read in a few different places, and the contraindications are really important. But I'm just really asking people to, take some charge. We're so conditioned to think that someone else has to heal us. So my book is full of ideas on how you can take charge and help, whether you're helping yourself or with the help of your healthcare professional. But it's not just take a drug or take an herb or take a vitamin. It's all the lifestyle things together, and you taking the time to love yourself enough to put some energy into learning about color and spending time in nature, and maybe journaling, and maybe taking up a craft. And this is really a great step in truly healing ourselves. And it's so worth it. And it's great for the environment too. Like you're supporting fields of flowers somewhere.
Great information. So, Brigitte Mars, my book, Banish the Blues Now, is a handbook that anybody can use to heal depression naturally without drugs. And again, it's so important that if you are taking psychiatric medication, that you only go off the medication with the advice and consent of your medical doctor. But there are things that you can do naturally, okay? And I'm going to suggest, okay, and you're typing, so Brigitte Mars, our audio audience will not be able to read your text, okay?
Sorry.
And
Okay.
so yeah, they will not be able to read that. So so again, if I'm working with somebody with depression, herbs are gonna be one of the tools, but maybe not the first tool that I turn to, right? So
Absolutely.
looking at it, and I think it's also important to look at, are there any medical conditions that you have that are actually contributing to your mental emotional state, right? So oftentimes we feel depressed, and that is the mental emotional state is a result of what's happening to us on the physical level, as well as what's happening to us emotionally. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. And you can find out more about me at my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Our guest today has been Brigitte Mars, an herbalist and author of Natural Remedies for Mental and Emotional Health. And you can find out more about her and her wonderful work at brigittemars.com. And remember, you can heal your mind naturally. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.